Partially offsetting those gains was a
Not blood.
drop in the costs of fruits and vegetables, due in a large part to a major surplus of tomatoes. In spite of concerted efforts
Tomato
to
juice.
stabilize the situation, the tomato crop continues.
Let's take a look back at Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is a 1978 American parody film directed by John DeBello based upon an original idea by Costa Dillon and produced by J. Stephen Peace. The screenplay was written by Dillon, Peace and DeBello as a collaboration. We follow Mason Dixon, played by David Miller, the leader of a team of specialists put together by the President of the United States to save the world from mutated killer tomatoes who are on the rampage, splattering innocent victims. The genesis of the film was when Costa Dillon, who went to high school and college with DeBello and Peace, saw the movie Attack of the Mushroom People and thought to himself, we could do something even sillier. Although he actually saw the movie and came up with the concept in high school, it was later on at UC Davis, whilst taking a film class together, that they made a 15-minute long Super 8 version of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. They received an A for the project, by the way. The idea for the title of the movie came first, with John DeBello saying about the premise, Killer Tomatoes was about the stupidest thing you could come up with. It's probably one of the few films that came into existence because of a title. After college, the three friends formed a sports highlights reel company. They would create analytical and highlight reels of college and high school sports teams. They would collect film on Friday night, develop it overnight and deliver it to coaches the very next day all around San Diego. Costa said about this time, we were making some money with this kind of really routine, ordinary filmmaking, but there wasn't much creativity to it. They decided to extend the college short into a musical based around Japanese kaiju horror movies, satirizing the difficulty that American bureaucracy has with dealing with big problems and disasters. David Miller, who plays the lead in the film, also went to school with the guys, and he and DeBello, who had made movies from a young age, had made a bunch of short and feature-length Super 8 films together at high school. John later contacted him and told him, we decided we're going to do a Killer Tomato movie and I want you to do the lead in it. Principal photography took around 1 month in 1977, with further pickup shots being done in 1978. After a further round of raising cash, which brought the budget up to around $100,000. Although the movie was a SAG production, they didn't ask for permission to shoot any scenes in locations. Instead, they would just block off a road, put them up for an hour or so, filmed and took them down and left. It is during the pickup shoots where a real helicopter crash occurs and is used in the final movie. A helicopter rented for the shoot was meant to land in the tomato field behind the law enforcement officers shooting at the tomatoes, but instead its tail hit the ground and it crashed. Thankfully nobody was injured in the crash, and Jack Riley, an actual serious Hollywood actor only hired for the reshoots, suggested, hey, why don't we go crawl out of the wreckage and ad-lib some dialogue? And DeBello thought that was a great idea, so that's exactly what happened.
Some sell, some buy, and only we know why. The rapper's more important than the prize.
Music for the movie was scored by Gordon Goodwin, who would later go on to be a Grammy Award-winning composer, writing for such films as Con Air and Animaniacs, amongst others. All of the songs were written by the three friends, however. Usually about now, I would talk about how this was a commercial and critical flop on release, but this is a true independent movie and was distributed independently, so no reliable figures exist for its box office gross. However, Costa has said that we lost our shirts in distribution, seeing as they had shot on negative rather than positive film, which gave a better quality for reproductions. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes was one of the first 100 videos on home video, which along with winning the Worst Vegetable Movie Award is where the movie's cult status started. Critical opinion, however, was very negative on release, with Variety writing the film isn't even worthy of sarcasm. and hasn't been much kinder since, with Michael Gingold reviewing the Blu-ray release in 2017, saying the movie has often been celebrated as a prime example of so bad it's funny cinema, when in fact it's an attempt at intentional comedy that is at best a scattershot success. I'd like to point out that it is the earnest intention to create a good movie and failing that is what turns a movie into a so bad it is good movie. This applies to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes in many ways. There was of course a 1990 cartoon called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which was actually based on the sequel, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, rather than the original movie. There was no intention to make a sequel, but clips from the original movie had appeared in a segment on an episode of the Muppet Babies, with this going on to be the highest rated episode of the season, sparking New World Cinema to fund an Attack of the Killer Tomatoes sequel, and when that was a success, that in turn spawned the cartoon, which I must admit I was a big fan of back in the day, with 21 episodes being made over a 2-season run. 3 sequels were actually produced, with George Clooney appearing in only his second film in 1988's Return of the Killer Tomatoes. I remember enjoying Return as a child, but can't say I remember either of the follow-up sequels, 1990's Killer Tomatoes Strike Back, or 1991's Killer Tomatoes Eat France. Video games were of course also brought out throughout the 80s and 90s, with the most prominent being the one produced in 1991 for the NES and Game Boy consoles based on the animated series rather than the films. Toys! We got a toy line because 90s. Produced by Mattel in 1991 based on the animated series, with 9 figures being available. I even think I had some of these.
I'm Mason Dixon, and this is...
God! It's Adolf Hitler!
Having rewatched this for the first time in probably 25 years, I have to say they were entirely successful in making a silly movie. Because this is entirely silly. The tomatoes are obviously the star of the show, and they actually had 3 different types of tomato. The star tomatoes, who were used for close-ups, stunt tomatoes that were parboiled for an hour to make them squishy, and the giant tomatoes that were actually made from Bart insulation foam that they could just roll about 3 or 4 times before they broke apart. There are some decent visual gags, and for an independent film the acting is fairly solid, and I got a fair few chuckles throughout, but it's not as good as other spoof parody movies of this era such as Airplane. But I can see why I enjoyed this as a child, and I didn't hate it as an adult either. Is it brilliant? No, but it is entertainingly silly still. I'm not sure if a modern audience would love it quite as much because it is very 70s. But never fear, because a reboot went into production and started filming in 2019. So CGI tomatoes coming to a cinema near you soon, I guess. So that is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, an entirely silly idea 3 friends had at high school that became a short, then a feature film, and spawned a mini media franchise of its own. I've still got a schedule. It's the same as the last 2 times I announced it, so it's on screen now. If you want to see any of these and you enjoyed this, then please subscribe. Or don't, I'm making them either way.